They say you don't know your own strength until being strong is your only choice. I learned mine the night my father crushed my fingers with a pair of rusted pliers, and my family stood by and watched. My name is Fidelia, and this is the story of how I stopped being invisible. Growing up in Millbrook, Ohio, I learned early that appearances were everything. Our town was the kind of place where everyone knew your business, where Sunday church attendance was mandatory for respect, and where a family's reputation could make or break your existence. We lived on Sycamore Street, in a 2-story colonial with white shutters and a perfectly manicured lawn. From the outside, we looked like the American dream. Inside, we were rotting from the core. My sister Brittany was 3 years older than me, and from the moment she could walk, she owned every room she entered. Blonde hair that caught the light just right, a smile that could charm anyone, and natural athleticism that made her the star of everything. By 15, she was cheerleading captain, homecoming queen, and the golden child my parents had always wanted. I was the afterthought, the one who ruined my mother's figure, the quiet one who preferred books to pep rallies, the daughter who was too much trouble and never quite enough of anything good. My father Frank was a deacon at Millbrook Community Church, a position he wore like a badge of honor. He had a booming voice that filled the sanctuary during hymns, and a firm handshake that made other men respect him. My mother Carol was PTA president, organized every bake sale and fundraiser, and never left the house without perfect makeup. Together, they were pillars of the community. At home, they were strangers, who happened to share a mortgage and a desperate need to maintain their image. The differences in how they treated us weren't subtle. Brittany got a brand new Honda Civic for her 16th birthday, cherry red with a bow on top, presented in the church parking lot so everyone could see. I got a lecture about responsibility when I asked to borrow the old Corolla for my library job. Brittany's closet overflowed with designer clothes. I wore hand-me-downs and clearance rack finds. When Brittany brought home a B-, my parents hired her a tutor. When I brought home straight A's, I got a nod and a reminder not to be prideful. But it wasn't just about material things. It was about presence, about mattering. At dinner, my father would ask Brittany about her day, hanging on every word about cheerleading practice or which boy asked her to prom. My mother would beam with pride. When they bothered to acknowledge me at all, it was usually to criticize. My posture wasn't straight enough. I was spending too much time reading. Why couldn't I be more social like Brittany? I learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less of a burden. I learned to accept the scraps of attention they threw my way and be grateful for them. I learned that love in our house was conditional, and I simply didn't meet the conditions. But I kept trying. I was 17 when everything changed. It was October, and the town was gearing up for the annual Harvest Festival at Millbrook High School. This wasn't just any school event. It was the social event of the season, where the entire town gathered to celebrate, where reputations were reinforced and social hierarchies were on full display. My mother had been planning it for months as PTA president. My father had volunteered to handle the financial oversight for the charity portion, which would benefit the local food bank. Brittany was performing with the cheer squad and had been talking non-stop about her dress. 3 days before the event, I went into Brittany's room looking for a textbook she'd borrowed. Her door was open, which was unusual. I should have just grabbed the book and left, but something caught my eye. A garment bag from an expensive boutique in Columbus was hanging on her closet door, partially unzipped. The dress inside was stunning. deep emerald green with delicate beading that probably cost more than I'd made in 6 months at the library. I knew my parents had told Brittany she needed to be more careful with spending after last month's credit card bill. I unzipped the bag fully and found the receipt tucked into the inner pocket. $1,200. My stomach dropped. But what really made my blood run cold was what I found next. Hidden in her desk drawer, under a stack of fashion magazines, was a bank envelope. Inside were deposit slips and a small notebook with careful calculations in Brittany's handwriting. The amounts matched withdrawals from the school's charity fund, the one my father was supposed to be overseeing. She'd been skimming money for months. Small amounts at first, 50 here, 100 there. But it added up. The dress was just the latest purchase in a long line of expenses funded by money meant for families who couldn't afford to feed their children. I stood there, holding the evidence, feeling something shift inside me. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was theft. This was criminal. And I knew with absolute certainty that if I didn't speak up, no one ever would. Brittany would get away with it, because she always got away with everything. My parents would cover for her, because protecting her image meant protecting theirs. But I couldn't let it go. Not this time. I waited until dinner that evening. We said grace, my father's voice booming with righteous authority as he thanked God for his blessings and asked for guidance in their charitable work. The irony wasn't lost on me. We began eating. Brittany launched into a story about cheer practice. I waited for a pause in the conversation. Then I spoke. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I found something in Brittany's room today. The table went quiet. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of annoyance. "Fidelia, we don't go into each other's private spaces," my mother said, her voice tight with disapproval. I was looking for my textbook, but that's not the point. The point is, I found the dress she bought for the fundraiser, $1,200. I also found bank records showing she's been stealing from the school charity fund. The silence that followed was deafening. Brittany's face went white, then red. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation," he said slowly. "It's not an accusation, it's a fact." I pulled out copies I'd made of the bank records and the receipt, sliding them across the table. "It's all there. Dates, amounts, everything." Brittany found her voice first. "You went through my things? You little snoop! Those records are none of your business." "They are when the money is supposed to go to people who actually need it. This is fraud. You stole from a charity, from families with hungry kids." My father picked up the papers, his face unreadable. My mother looked between him and Brittany, her expression morphing from shock to calculation. I watched the wheels turning in her head, watched her decide what mattered more, the truth or the image. "This has to be a misunderstanding," she said finally. "Brittany wouldn't do something like this." "It's right there in black and white, Mom." "You don't understand the situation," Brittany said, her voice wheedling. "I was going to pay it back. I just needed the money temporarily." "That's still theft," I said. My father set the papers down carefully. When he looked at me, there was something dangerous in his eyes. "What exactly do you think is going to happen here, Fidelia?" "I think you're going to report this. I think Brittany is going to face consequences for what she did. I think we're going to make this right." He laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. "Is that what you think? You think I'm going to destroy my daughter's future, my reputation, everything I've built in this community over some paperwork? It's not just paperwork. It's theft. It's a family matter, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet tone he used when he was really angry. And it stays in this family. Do you understand me? I stared at him. No, I don't understand. How can you just ignore this? My mother leaned forward. Fidelia, honey, you need to think about what you're doing. If this gets out, it will hurt all of us. Not just Brittany, the entire family. Your father's position at the church, my work with the PTA, Brittany's chances at college scholarships. Is that really what you want? What I want is for someone to care that she did something wrong. What we care about, my father said, standing up from his chair, is protecting this family. Something you clearly don't understand. I stood too, my hands shaking. I understand that Brittany has been getting away with everything her entire life, because you two are too concerned with how things look to care about how things actually are. But this isn't about me. This is about doing the right thing. The right thing, he repeated mockingly. You want to lecture me about doing the right thing? You, who can't even manage to make your parents proud. You think you know better than me? I know stealing is wrong. And I know that family loyalty matters more than your self-righteous crusade. He moved around the table toward me. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget what you saw. You're going to destroy those copies, and you're never going to speak of this again. Are we clear? No, I can't do that. His face darkened. Can't or won't? Both. That's when I saw him look down at the counter, at the toolbox he'd left there after fixing the sink earlier. Before I could process what was happening, he'd reached in and pulled out a pair of rusty pliers, the kind meant for gripping pipes. You want to make trouble for this family? He asked quietly. Let me teach you something about consequences. I started to back away, but my mother's voice stopped me. Frank, what are you doing? Teaching our daughter a lesson about loyalty. Then he grabbed my wrist. I tried to pull away, but he was stronger. He dragged me to the workbench in the corner of the kitchen and slammed my hand down on it, palm up. Before I could scream, before I could process what was happening, he positioned the pliers over my fingers. This is what happens when you don't learn to mind your business, he said, and then he squeezed. The pain was instant and overwhelming. I heard the crack before I felt it, the sound of bone breaking dry and brittle in the quiet kitchen. Then the agony hit, white-hot and all-consuming. I screamed. The pliers had crushed 2 of my knuckles, the bones splintering under the pressure. When he finally let go, I collapsed to my knees, cradling my hand to my chest. Blood seeped through my fingers where the metal had broken skin. Through the haze of pain, I looked up at my mother. She was staring at the wall, her face carefully blank. Not helping, not horrified, just distant, as if this was happening to someone else. Brittany was still sitting at the table, and when our eyes met, she smiled. Not a big smile, just a small curl of her lips, satisfied and cold. Clean yourself up, my father said, tossing a dish towel at me. And if anyone asks, you slammed your hand in a car door. We're not taking you to the hospital. He walked back to his dinner like nothing had happened. My mother followed suit. Brittany went back to her phone. I knelt on the kitchen floor, my hand screaming with pain, and understood with perfect clarity that I was alone. I had always been alone in this family. That night, lying in my bed with my hand throbbing and swelling, I made a decision. I couldn't leave yet. I was 17, still had half a year of high school left. No money, nowhere to go. But I could wait. I could plan. And I could make sure that when I was ready, when I finally walked away from this house and these people, I wouldn't be the only one suffering consequences. The Harvest Festival happened as planned. Brittany wore her $1,200 dress and looked stunning. My parents smiled and shook hands and accepted compliments on their wonderful family. I stayed home that night, my hand too injured to help. I sat in my room and listened to the silence and started making plans. My hand healed slowly and badly. Without proper medical treatment, the bones set crooked. My fingers were permanently damaged, bent at odd angles, stiff and aching in cold weather. But instead of making me weak, it made me focused. This was my evidence, my reminder of why I couldn't forgive, couldn't forget, couldn't let this go. 2 months after the incident, I walked into Henderson's garage on impulse. The owner, Sal Henderson, was a gruff man in his 60s, a Vietnam veteran with scarred hands and a direct way of speaking. When I told him I wanted to learn mechanical work, he studied my damaged hand. "What happened?" he asked. "Car door," I said automatically. He snorted. "That's a lie, but I respect that you're sticking to it. Why do you want to work here?" "Maybe I don't want to be the kind of girl people expect me to be." Something shifted in his expression. "Come here. Let me see if you can even hold a wrench." That was the beginning. Sal didn't ask questions about my home life, he just taught me. How to diagnose engine problems by sound. How to take apart a transmission and put it back together. How to weld. How to use a torque wrench. The work was hard and my damaged hand made it harder, but I adapted. More importantly, Sal taught me about business. "Any decent mechanic can fix a car," he'd say. "But if you want to really understand how the world works, you need to understand money. Where it comes from, where it goes, who controls it. People lie about a lot of things, but money trails don't lie." I thought about my father's charity fund work, about my mother's PTA fundraisers, about Brittany's mysteriously funded shopping. I started paying more attention. At home, I became even more invisible. My parents assumed I was still just working at the library part-time. I'd leave in my library clothes and change before heading to the garage. I stopped trying to engage with them at all. They seemed relieved by my absence. 6 months after my father broke my hand, Sal introduced me to his nephew, Marcus. Marcus worked in IT and had skills that existed in a moral gray area. He could crack passwords, trace digital footprints, recover deleted files. He handed me a laptop, completely clean and untraceable, and gave me a crash course in digital security. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. He shrugged. "Uncle Sal says you remind him of his daughter. That's enough for me." With Marcus's tools and Sal's training, I started my real work. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, I'd slip into my father's office and photograph documents. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Frank Morrison wasn't just overseeing the church's charitable giving. He was running a loan sharking operation through it. He'd identify vulnerable congregation members, people going through hardships, and offer them help money to tide them over, always framed as Christian charity. But there were strings attached. The loans came with crushing interest rates, and when people couldn't pay, he'd use their desperation against them. I found records of a woman who'd lost her house, a man who'd lost his business. It was predatory and evil. And he did it all while standing in front of the church every Sunday, leading prayers and talking about God's mercy. My mother was easier to investigate because she was sloppy. Her affair with Principal Davidson had been going on for over a year. I found receipts for hotel rooms, always paid for with PTA funds disguised as education conferences. They weren't just having an affair, they were embezzling together, taking money meant for school programs and spending it on weekend getaways. Brittany was the hardest to investigate because she was paranoid. But she made one crucial mistake. He trusted her best friend Madison, and Madison backed up their text conversations to the cloud with a weak password. Once I was in, I found everything. The money Brittany supposedly returned to the charity fund, she'd never actually returned it. She'd created false deposit slips and pocketed the cash. But that was just the beginning. I found evidence of a calculated campaign of psychological warfare against another cheerleader, a girl named Ashley Chen, who'd been a rival for captain. Brittany had created fake social media accounts to spread rumors about Ashley, planted evidence in her locker to make it look like she was cheating on tests, manipulated situations to make Ashley look unstable. The campaign had worked. Ashley had been kicked off the squad, lost her scholarship prospects, and eventually transferred schools. Her reputation was destroyed. The texts between Brittany and Madison were gleeful, celebrating each small victory, mocking Ashley's pain. It was sociopathic. By late spring, I had everything I needed. Documented evidence of my father's loan sharking, proof of my mother's affair and embezzlement, a complete record of Brittany's systematic destruction of another student. I had names, dates, amounts, screenshots, audio recordings, everything a prosecutor could dream of. But I didn't go to the authorities. Not yet. I wanted them to fall publicly, spectacularly, in a way that would leave no room for denial or redemption. I wanted the whole town to see what the Morrison family really was. And I wanted to be long gone before the debris finished falling. I planned everything for the first Friday in May. The night of the biggest football game of the season, the rivalry match against Oakdale that the entire town attended. Everyone who mattered in Millbrook would be gathered in one place, on their phones, connected to social media, ready to receive news. I created anonymous email accounts. I compiled packets of evidence organized by recipient. For the church board, everything related to my father's loan sharking, including testimonies from victims. For the school board, evidence of my mother and Principal Davidson's affair and embezzlement. For the district attorney's office, formal complaints with all supporting documentation. For the local newspaper, a summary with links to verify everything. But the pièce de résistance was for the town itself. I created a video showing exactly what Brittany had done to Ashley. Screenshots of texts, recordings of phone calls, a timeline of events. I ended it with a simple question in white text on black. This is who you've been celebrating. Does she deserve your admiration? I scheduled everything to deploy at 7 p.m. On the morning of the big game, I went to school like normal. I worked my shift at the garage like normal. I came home and packed a bag with my essential belongings, my laptop, my documents, the money I'd saved converted to cash. I put the bag in the trunk of the old Corolla. I ate dinner with my family that night. My last dinner in that house. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody asked how my day was. They literally didn't know I was leaving, because they'd never really known I was there. At 6:30, they all left for the game. I sat in my room with my damaged hand resting on my laptop, watching the clock tick down. At exactly 7 p.m., I clicked send. The emails would hit first. Church board members would open urgent messages about financial impropriety. School board members would see evidence of embezzlement. The DA's office would receive formal criminal complaints. 5 minutes later, the social media posts would go live. By 7:15, everyone at that stadium would be looking at their phones, seeing the truth about the Morrison family. I gave it 20 minutes. Then I called my father. "Fidelia, where are you? What have you done?" "I'm at home, and I didn't do anything. I just told the truth." "How's the game?" "You need to stop this right now. This is insane. We're your family." "You haven't been my family in a very long time. But you're right that we're connected. That's why I wanted you all to fall together." I could hear my mother in the background, her voice shrill with panic. "We can fix this. Just come to the stadium, we'll talk." "There's nothing to figure out. Everything I sent out is documented and true." "You're a criminal, Dad. Mom's an embezzler and an adulterer. Brittany's a sociopath. And now everyone knows it." "You vindictive little..." "One more thing. I'm not coming to the stadium. I'm leaving. Tonight. For good. But I wanted you all to know that this wasn't random. This was me. I did this. The daughter you ignored, the one you hurt, the one you thought didn't matter. I tore down everything you built. And I'd do it again. I hung up before he could respond. Then I turned off my phone, removed the SIM card, and smashed it with a hammer. I walked through the house one last time. The perfect living room with its carefully arranged furniture. The kitchen where my father had broken my hand. The hallway lined with photographs of Brittany while there were maybe 3 of me. I felt nothing looking at it now, just distant satisfaction. I locked the door behind me when I left. I got in the car and drove to Sal's garage. He was waiting for me, sitting on the hood of his pickup truck. "You did it?" he asked. "I did it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was $5,000 in cash and a letter of recommendation. "You worked hard. You earned it. I want you to have something to start your new life with." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it for everything. For teaching me a trade, for believing in me, for being the father figure my actual father never was. Then I got back in the car and drove. I didn't look back at Millbrook as I left. There was nothing there for me anymore. I heard about the aftermath later. My father was arrested 2 days after the game. Multiple victims came forward. He was charged with extortion, fraud, and operating an illegal lending business. He faced up to 20 years in prison. My mother lost her position with the PTA immediately. The school board investigation confirmed the embezzlement. Principal Davidson was fired. My parents' divorce was public and ugly. My mother moved to another state to escape the shame. Brittany's fall was perhaps the most complete. The video about Ashley went viral locally. Ashley's family filed a civil lawsuit for defamation and harassment. The evidence was overwhelming. Brittany was expelled 2 weeks before graduation. Her college acceptance was rescinded. Her friends abandoned her. The house on Sycamore Street was sold to cover legal fees and restitution. Everything they'd built, the reputation, the status, the carefully maintained image, it all crumbled in a matter of weeks. And I was hundreds of miles away in Pittsburgh, watching it happen from a safe distance, feeling only cold satisfaction. Pittsburgh was good for me. I lived with my friend Tessa from an online book club. She was 10 years older and had her life together. She gave me space and time and the occasional reminder that I was safe now. I got my GED within 3 months. I enrolled in a technical certification program at a community college, focusing on automotive repair and small business management. The damaged hand was a challenge, but I'd learned to work around it. During the day, I went to classes. In the evenings, I worked at a local auto shop. Therapy helped. Tessa convinced me to see a counselor who specialized in family trauma. Dr. Sarah Chen didn't judge me for what I'd done. She helped me understand that revenge and justice weren't mutually exclusive, that sometimes they were the same thing. "You were surviving," she told me. "Everything you did to survive and to protect other people they were hurting. That's not something to feel guilty about." A year after I left Millbrook, Sal called me. "Got a proposition for you, kid. I'm retiring. I want you to buy the garage." I almost dropped the phone. "Sal, I don't have that kind of money." "I'm not asking for market value. I'm asking for a fair price paid over time, and the promise that you'll keep the business running right. So what do you say?" Yes, I want that." The negotiations took 2 months. I said goodbye to Tessa and my Pittsburgh life and drove back to Ohio in early autumn, almost 18 months after I'd left. Millbrook had changed and hadn't changed. The Morrison family name was mud. I kept a low profile at first. I changed my last name legally to Henderson, taking Sal's surname as both a tribute and a shield. Fidelia Henderson had no connection to the disgraced Morrisons. Sal officially retired the week I took over. "Make me proud, kid," he said, and then he was gone. I stood in the garage alone that first morning and felt something I'd never felt before. I felt like I belonged. This was mine. Not my family's, not something I had to share or fight for. Mine. Earned through work and sacrifice and determination. I renamed the place. The sign went up on a cold October morning. The Forge Auto Repair, owned and operated by Fidelia Henderson. The name was deliberate. A forge was where metal was heated and hammered and shaped into something stronger. It was what had happened to me, and it was what I wanted to offer others now. A place of transformation. Business was slow at first, but Sal's old customers came back. I proved myself fair prices and honest assessments. Word spread. My reputation grew. I hired my first employee 6 months after taking over. A kid named Jordan, 19 years old and desperate for a chance to learn. They reminded me of myself. Then came Elena, a certified mechanic in her 40s who'd been laid off from a dealership. We worked well together, and the garage grew. I saw my family around town occasionally. The first time was about 8 months after I'd returned. I was at the hardware store when I came face to face with my mother. She looked older, harder, wearing discount store clothes. We stared at each other for a long moment. She just turned and walked away. I realized she was ashamed, but her shame had nothing to do with what she'd done to me. She was ashamed that I'd exposed her. I saw my father once, from a distance. He'd been released on bail pending trial. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. I felt nothing looking at him. No anger, no satisfaction. no sadness, just distant recognition that he'd once had power over me and didn't anymore. Brittany I saw more often. She was working at a fast food restaurant. She'd gained weight, lost the glossy perfection she'd once maintained. Once she saw me getting into my truck. She stared at me across the parking lot, and I saw the hatred there, raw and undisguised. She blamed me for everything. I just nodded at her and drove away. Her opinion didn't matter anymore. Life settled into a rhythm. Wake up early, open the garage, work on cars, teach Jordan and Elena, handle the business side. Close up in the evening, go to my small apartment. It was ordinary and it was beautiful. 2 years after taking over the garage, I hired 2 more mechanics and expanded into a second bay. The Forge had a reputation now as the best independent shop in the county. I was making good money, enough to live comfortably and give back to the community. I set up a scholarship fund for students from low-income families who wanted to pursue technical certifications. I made anonymous donations to the food bank. I sponsored a local girls' sports team, thinking of Ashley Chen and all the other people Brittany had hurt. The trial for my father finally happened in my 3rd year back. I didn't attend. I'd given my testimony through a deposition. The outcome was reported in the local paper. 15 years for multiple counts of fraud and extortion. My mother faced charges too. She took a plea deal, served 8 months, and moved to Florida. Brittany never faced criminal charges for what she did to Ashley. Her actions were cruel but not technically illegal. But Ashley's family won their civil suit. Brittany was ordered to pay damages she couldn't afford. On the 3rd anniversary of taking over the garage, I stood outside before opening and looked at the sign. The Forge. 3 years ago, I'd been broken, hammered down, heated in the fire of my family's cruelty. But I hadn't shattered. I'd been shaped into something stronger. My hand would always bear the scars, the crooked fingers, the aching joints. But when I looked at them now, I didn't see damage. I saw survival. I saw proof that I'd endured the worst they could do and come out the other side. Sometimes customers would ask about my hand. I developed a standard answer. Old injury, I've learned to work around it. And I had. The limitation had made me creative, adaptable, stronger in unexpected ways. Late one afternoon, a woman came in with her daughter, maybe 17 years old. Their car needed work. I gave them an honest assessment and a fair price. The daughter spoke up then. "Can I watch while you work on it? I want to learn how cars work." I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the hunger for knowledge, the desire to be less helpless. "Yeah, you can watch. I'll explain what I'm doing. And if you want to learn more, we offer apprenticeships." Her eyes lit up, and I felt that familiar sense of purpose, giving chances to those who needed them, being the person I'd needed when I was drowning. The years passed. The Forge grew. I opened a second location, then a third. I hired more employees, trained more apprentices. I established a foundation to help people escape abusive family situations. Legal support, counseling, job training, housing assistance. Everything I wished had existed when I was 17 and desperate. I wrote a book eventually. Not a memoir, but a business guide infused with personal philosophy. Forged, building success from broken beginnings. I talked about starting with nothing, about finding mentors, about integrity and hard work. The book did well. I donated the profits to scholarship funds. At 50, I started thinking about succession planning. Elena and Jordan would take over primary operations. I'd set up a trust to ensure the company stayed independent, that it maintained the values it was built on. At 60, I officially stepped back from day-to-day operations. Elena took over as CEO. Jordan became COO. I remained as chairman, involved in major decisions but not drowning in daily management. It was time to let the next generation lead. I spent more time with the foundation, more time mentoring, more time using my story to help others. I traveled. I came home to my house, my community, my chosen family, and felt grateful. At 70, I was invited back to Millbrook for a community honor. The town wanted to recognize my business success and philanthropic work. I almost declined, but I decided to accept, to show them, and myself, that I'd transcended it all. In my acceptance speech, I was honest. I left this town when I was 17 because I had to. My home life was unbearable. But I found people who helped me, who gave me chances. I built a life and a business based on those lessons. And now I try to be for others what those people were for me. The applause was genuine. This was legacy. Not the money or awards or business empire, but the lives touched, the people helped, the cycle of harm broken. At 80, I was content. The forge was thriving under the third generation of leadership. The foundation had helped thousands. My book was still selling, still inspiring people. I'd lived to see my impact multiply beyond anything I could have imagined at 17. One evening, sitting on my porch watching the sunset, I looked at my gnarled, arthritic hands. The fingers that had never straightened, the knuckles swollen with age and hard use, the scars from decades of work. They were ugly hands, damaged hands, old hands. They were also the hands that had saved me, that had built everything I valued, that had helped countless others. They were proof that beauty wasn't about perfection. It was about purpose, about strength, about refusing to be destroyed by what was meant to break you. I'd been forged in fire, hammered by cruelty, shaped by pain. But I'd chosen what form I would take. I'd chosen strength and purpose and generosity. I'd chosen to build instead of destroy, to help instead of hurt. The girl I'd been, invisible and desperate in that perfect house on Sycamore Street, he would be amazed by the woman I'd become. Proud, I hoped. Grateful that we'd survived, that we'd fought back, that we'd won, not just the battle of revenge, but the larger war of becoming someone worth being. The sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, fire colors, forge colors. I smiled, my old hands resting peaceful in my lap, and felt complete. The story that had started with breaking had ended with building. The girl who'd been hammered down had forged herself into something unbreakable. And that, more than anything else, was victory.